We see that in tech very simply. What is the number one threat to businesses? It's usually not you lost a device and someone like decrypted your computer. It's phishing. It's social engineering.
Welcome back to another installment of the Next Gen Case Study Series. On today's episode, we have Dave Bour, who is the founder and principal of the IT Plan, a company specializing in IT development and information security compliance for early stage companies. With over 15 years of experience, Dave focuses on building IT teams and systems, particularly for startups and nonprofits, to navigate common technological challenges and streamline operations, which is why we're excited to have him on the show. Dave, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you so much, Devin. Excited to be here.
Cool. So to get things started here, I guess let's dive into a little bit of your background. If you give me a quick little summary of who you are, where you came from, and how you ended up founding the IT plan, we can start there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's really important to determine whether or not someone is qualified, I think, because we all have opinions. And I'm not saying I'm qualified. I leave that to you. Um, yeah, I started off my career in nonprofits, working in Boston for about 5 years. And I moved to New York City, and I've been working here with startups for the past 10 years. I found the skill set transferred phenomenally well from from nonprofits to startups, because you're kind of working on a shoestring budget. You're an individual wearing many different hats. And so I had the opportunity to start with, fixing printers, desktop support, working my way up through networking, systems administration, systems development, cloud tooling, migrations, and later building out teams, IT teams, security teams, compliance teams, and really seeing how most startups face the same problems over and over again. And so I developed a roadmap that helps them navigate those early stages before we hire IT. And even though my last position was a senior director, I'm still fixing printers. So you never get away from that.
Right. There's a relatability there, Dave. I the other day I was having a conversation with a friend of mine about how, as a kind of an entrepreneur, somebody who starts up a business, there was this thing that everybody kind of imagines it being like, the glitz and the glam and the glory and all that. But then at the end of the day, I'm still the one vacuuming the office and picking up all the paperwork. And so I'm really just an overpaid janitor some days. So I really can relate to that, Dave. That's, um, you know, this idea of wearing many hats, I think is a part of it. And I guess speaking of hats, beyond fixing printers, what are some of the hats you're wearing in your kind of day-to-day role?
Yeah. So I support, right now I have about 12 clients, and gosh, you name it. Um, One of the more interesting ones that many startups have been pursuing recently is SOC 2 Type 2 certifications. So I wear the hat of like fractional CISO, fractional compliance officer, helping companies like get that certification and install that framework within their organization. So that's a big one today. Another one is, consolidation of SaaS and setting it up. Just helping companies that to date have had everybody signing up for whatever they wanted to. Now there's data silos, bills coming in. So we consolidate that. We set up single sign-on. Deploy good practices like password managers and staff training. Yeah, I find myself doing a lot of that. And between it is device management, new hires, onboarding, the daily how do I and where can I find? There's a
Mhm.
lot of that too.
There's a curve here in terms of finding people that you can serve, serving those people, and then coming to an ending of that relationship or maintaining an ongoing relationship. But then the role then does fall back onto you once everything's kind of up and running. Okay, we need the next client and the client after that and the client after that. I'm curious, Dave, if you could kind of walk me through what that kind of customer experience map looks like when they find you or how they discover you, and then, how you kind of bring them into your ecosystem and nurture them into becoming a client of yours.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks. Great question. Thanks for asking. I'm proud to say that there is very few endings of those relationships, that life cycle doesn't seem to end, which can be a good and a bad thing.
Right.
But this is because, my goal with IT Plan is to fill this gap, because tech is something we're all familiar with personally. You need a new computer, you go to Apple, you go to Best Buy, whatever, and you buy one, you set it up. And so as a founder or part of a leadership team, it's difficult to justify hiring someone that you perceive to be doing something you can do. It's not the same with finance. I don't know what the shortcut is for pivot table and Excel, and I don't think many founders do either. So you need a finance person. Same with HR. IT tends to come last. So that's not the case in businesses, that you just go buy a computer and start using it. So it usually leads to a lot of tech debt, a lot of like disorganization, you could say, but there's no judgment around that. And my goal is to fill that gap and then help them hire, ideally, a sub-consultant of mine to become their full-time IT person. So at that point, we would hand it off. In some cases, I've become more of an advisor and manager of sorts of that person. But I've been blessed to just constantly have inbound. And I think it's for two reasons. One is my audience is early stage companies, which most MSPs, you can say, or IT providers don't target. They target large organizations because they charge you on a per computer basis. We'll install the software per computer. This is how much you pay us. So you want to go after large clients. So it's a function of the audience, but it's also the experience and the nature of it. Many of my clients are in healthcare, so you have to understand HIPAA. You have to understand data management, and not the boring old you can't download this and you have to encrypt that and you have to put in a password here, because that's no fun. So I bring what I like to say is a more humanistic approach to IT, because ultimately, at the end of the day, I think tech is more cultural than it is technical. And once you see it from that perspective, it's no longer this top-down approach of, hey, you have to do this. It's more like, how can we make tech work with your workflow? How can we support how you want to work? And then we'll handle the back-end side so it's secure. And that resonates with a lot of companies. So they tend to hire me very early, and they have found me through my articles and my writings. I have a course on Udemy. I write a lot of articles on Medium, pretty active in some Slack communities and on LinkedIn. And a lot of it's word of mouth, and a lot of it is finding those. So I'll get inbound. I will do an assessment, which generally generates a lot of work. And then they say, wow, okay, we didn't know this. Can you do it? Yes, of course. And then we transition into like hourly type relationship. And I just become one of the team. I'm in Slack, I'm in email, I'm there all day, checking all of it. And it's a lot. But if they roll off, it's because we've gotten to a good point and they're growing. So I've done my job and I want to find them a full-time in-house employee.
It's so interesting to hear how the application of tech and the involvement of the human beings in the team. And when I grew up on a computer, literally living in the internet. So I feel like all of these pieces of technology are just an extension of my body. Maybe I'm a cyborg to some degree. And I take that for granted so often that when I'm having a conversation with another human, I find that there is this massive disconnect between them and the technology, in spite of how predominant it is and how much we actually use it. Um, and from the sounds of it, the way that you're kind of tackling that is through education as a top of funnel approach to things. Like, hey, listen, everybody's got XYZ problems. Here's one, two, three solutions, and when you are ready to get more advanced in your usage of technology in your business, that's where Dave comes in. Is that about accurate?
Yeah, it's great. Fantastic summary. I need to adopt your brevity. That was perfect. Spot on.
So when it comes to creating that workflow and that type of content and putting it out there, I imagine you have to field a lot of, inbound inquiries and stuff like that. Could we talk to the types of technologies that you, the IT guy, are deploying to help make that process easier or more efficient?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just got to say, you cannot, you can't minimize talking about the human aspect of this because
Hmm.
it's the differentiator. A lot of tech people get into tech because they like the technology, right?
Right.
It's like you like making pottery, so you become I don't know, what would that be, a potter?
A plotter,
And,
yeah.
and then you find yourself always just um, dealing with your supply chain, and you're never actually making pottery. So in tech, we get really interested in computers. We love making things work. We like these complicated problems, and we kind of forget that really at the end of the day, it's because there's humans behind there trying to use it. And if you're not approaching it from how they want to use it, then it's really going to be adopted or a success. And yeah, education is a big part of that. So that tech specifically for this audience usually looks like um, developing or deploying a password manager pretty early on. You typically find Excel sheets are used, or people just sending back and forth. Shared accounts are very common in my industry, or rather with this target audience. So password manager leading into like single sign-on, a lot of OAuth, a lot of SAML-based single sign-on where possible. We do see that that's an enterprise function for a lot of downstream applications platforms. So it's not always practical, but where possible, let's make life easier. Whenever you ask for something from somebody, you have to give them something back. I need you to set up 2FA. I set up single sign-on, so once you do that, you can get into 3 other applications without needing a password. Your life's easier, and everything is more secure. So that's pretty common. Training is another one. Training and documentation. Just how does our product work? Do we have a network architecture diagram? A lot of that tends to be lacking. I love diagrams. We could talk at each other all day, but if I showed you a picture of what I do, you can probably figure it out half the time. SaaS management's a big one, and device management. So enrolling them in a device management platform. Apple has a great program with the e-commerce store, the Apple Business Manager, and then a device manager. So you can buy something in a custom Apple store for your company, have the receipt forever, and it's automatically just pushed into the device management platform. So that when someone turns it on, it's a guided experience. It skips all those screens about geography, whether or not you want to enable Siri, and just has them make a password and sign in. So I see that's pretty often too. And then last but not least, like some controls and processes around new vendors, typically, because you have to draw a line in the sand. I could fix the tech debt, but if we don't establish a good process that combats how we got there in the first place, then it's just going to happen again. So SaaS management, procurement, device management, single sign-on passwords, and then information. Information management is huge. Google has a lot of great tools, so I like to use those, like labels and such, approval workflows. But those are what I find myself most commonly implementing.
He said at the top of the show, I'm not an expert. I'll let you be the judge of that. And then goes on to offer 15 years of experience in short of a minute and a half of what a startup company needs to integrate technology into their business. Your expertise is really clear in how simple things have become for you, right? Because from the outside looking in, people see this mess going on. And you said you're kind of a visual person. So for you, you see that mess, and then all of a sudden, I imagine your mind just like untangling wires and cables and things like that to put things in order. I wonder if you could share a little bit about how your early experience in this world has kind of helped you carve out that efficiency, that simplicity.
Yeah. Wow. Everybody says they want to start a podcast, but uh, your ability to read into this is extraordinary. Thank you.
Thanks.
I agree. So tech is already as complex as we need it to be. The answer is usually not to add; it's usually to make it simpler. And you can simplify by reducing, or you can simplify through efficiency. Um, personally, I prefer a mix of both. Um, yeah, when you're starting out, you're doing things manually. You're just like making it work for now. You're solving now problems. You're not solving future problems. So when you get to it, if you do it right, then you should actually have that mess at a certain point because you've gotten to a point where now things need to be more efficient. So, um, so that's where we set up the automations, like the device management, like I was talking about, and it goes a long way. So I learned this through being hands on the ground for a long time. One thing I refuse to do is put something beneath me or underneath me. Yes, there are things I do not like, but if you are engaged at a tactical level throughout your career, you're always going to be seeing the problem from both the user perspective and an administrator perspective. And that's absolutely required to develop holistic solutions. Um, I find a lot of complexity and issues came from uh, miseducation. So that's a big one. Not being aligned on how we work, which is policy development. It's boring, but you can make it fun. And that's the task and the challenge of a good IT person. Isn't to find the right solution. It's to make that solution fun, usable, approachable. That's huge. Yeah. So early in my career, being close to the ground really helped me develop that understanding of how people use the technology. And then as I just moved up the chain a little bit, both in terms of hierarchy within the organization, um, and more exposure to networking systems, how they all interact with each other, then you can start to see, well, if I come into a company and they need everything, let's say, where do you start? If you start with one thing right away, let's say train staff, and then 2 weeks later you deploy password manager, and then 2 weeks later you do a single sign-on and staff are having to pay attention. Why is my password used anymore? Well, you don't even need it. And then you switch another thing and another thing. This change fatigue sets in. People stop paying attention. So you have to batch it together. And that's the holistic approach. When you see that a password manager and training and signing into Chrome can all be done relatively closely together, then you deploy it all at once. All of a sudden, you had to change how people work, which is a very difficult thing to get adoption on. But you've made that balance of making things easier as you require more of them, making it harder. They understand the why because of the training, and all of a sudden you have like a pretty high adoption rate.
It's the individual's reluctance to want to participate in it, and you have to
Right.
have a specific skill to be able to get people, as I call it, enrolled. You have to get them to
Yeah.
buy into the idea that I know at first on the outside this looks complicated, but if you trust me, I can lead you through it, and it's going to simplify everything. So how do you approach that conversation with people?
Yeah. Great question. And it's 100% accurate. And the bottom line here is responsibility. If a lot of IT people tend to approach this as like, this is my environment. Like, I'm going to lock it down. You can't do this. And what you're doing is you're taking autonomy and responsibility away from the individual. So they turn off the critical thinking part of their brain because you got it.
Right.
You're not enabling them. The first thing I say in my trainings is, I'm not. You're going to be able to make mistakes. I'm not here to protect you. I'm here to guide you, but it's your responsibility to understand how this works or what the requirements are. And usually, out of like 100 people, 5 won't want to do it, or just for whatever reason. And it's okay. Again, there's no judgment, but they just refuse to take that responsibility. But most people do. And so all of a sudden, and to further that, make it applicable to their personal life. We approach things so much from like the business perspective, but there's a lot of carryover. So when you're telling someone about two-factor authentication, why not explain how to check for, or how to see if your password was lost in a data breach? Yeah, I love to use have I been pwned. A lot of this stuff is built in nowadays, even from they'll tell if you have a compromised password, but I love that website because it shows you exactly where your data was lost. So like LinkedIn had a breach of my username and password. Yes, it was encrypted, but like 10 years later, that's going to be able to be broken. So if you're human like me, you're using that same password over and over again. And 10 years later, someone's going to be able to get it and start trying it on Chase and Bank of America, et cetera, et cetera. So what protects you against that? Well, they probably don't have your phone. So two-factor authentication is important, not just here, but also in your personal life. And it resonates, right? One more thing I want to say on that is we came back, just to go back a step. We were talking about how do you simplify. When you work with business leads, they look to tech as a to fix problems.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have this problem, so I need this platform. I want to switch to this platform because it'll solve this problem. Tech doesn't really fix problems. It's a tool. It's a hammer. It doesn't nail the nail. You have to do it. So, really, at the end of the day, what I explain to people is when you have a platform, and I see this all the time. I have HubSpot, and I want to switch to something else. I have something else I want to switch to HubSpot, and I've seen every company use every tool out there at this point, and not one of them is happy. Especially when it comes to call center software, and I do not blame it. That's another hat I wear, by the way. Love developing call center, but you're not really finding a solution or fixing a problem with that new software. You're switching out one set of problems for a different set of problems.
Right.
So when you're talking about your solution, you have to say like, I prefer this problem set over that problem set. And if you can't say what that problem set is, then it's going to surprise you. You're going to find it out while you're using it, and that's going to be difficult. So, yeah, just wanted to mention that.
As you were talking, you reminded me of, and I don't know, I'm a nerd for this kind of stuff, and I don't know where I found this somewhere. They did a study on the difference between a traffic light and a traffic circle, and found that, contrary to most people's belief, the traffic circle had significantly less car accidents than the traffic lights. And they attributed this to the active focus of the driver. If you put your power in the street light, something else is making the decision for you. So now you therefore do not have to think anymore. But if you maintain that power in the traffic circle, now you have to be engaged, you have to participate, you have to proceed with caution. And so I wonder if there's an analogy there in terms of the way you bring things to people. It's like, hey, listen, we're not solving traffic light problems, we're solving traffic circle problems. We need you to be in, active, and participating to kind of like have the evolution take place. But then, okay, so Dave, this is where it gets a little bit more kind of high level. How do you measure the success of the work that you do? Because so much of it, just like this, traffic light, traffic circle, is intangible until you actually like put it into practice.
Yeah, that's true. Just on what you were just saying, I love that. Thank you for sharing it with me. I love that analogy. But it highlights, we see that in tech very simply. What is the number one threat to businesses? It's usually not you lost a device and someone like decrypted your computer. It's phishing. It's social engineering.
Right.
And that's indicative of what you just said, is that all you need to do is be aware. And if you're aware and educated, then your number one threat becomes like the number 10 threat. Something else moves up. So you're switching out a problem. But the way I measure success is twofold. First of all, because I'm usually entering a mess or a messy situation, I would say, I measure my success in terms of dollars saved. I can usually pay for myself within a few months, and then pay for myself going forward for a couple more months with annual savings. And that's just simply, consolidating accounts. Usually there's a lot of old licenses attributed to people who no longer work at that company, and developing the processes to catch those earlier on in the process. So I measure my success by paying for myself, and I measure my success by intangibly, or rather qualitatively, through feedback, and not like direct feedback, but just looking at the kinds of problems that people have when I come on, and then the kinds of problems that they have like 3 months, 6 months, and 9 months later. And the volume themselves should go down, and it almost always does. but the quality of like what people are asking me changes. It's no longer, this isn't working. How do I do this? And it is a little bit sometimes, password resets, what have you. But it's like our team wants to accomplish this goal. We believe this is a path forward. Do you think that would work for us too? So we're now evaluating technology as the tool rather than the, you could say the stoplight, the thing that is doing the work for us, the thing that is going to fix our problems. It's no longer a savior. It's more of a tool. And I just see that shift qualitatively. So it's difficult to quantify. I really appreciate you making me think through that.
Yeah, because that's one of the things, I realized even early on in my career as somebody who does marketing was like, okay, well, what's the business's goal? What are they aiming at? What do they want to get from this? And it's not just a new client because it doesn't end at just a new client. You know what I mean? You don't just get a few bucks and then move on. There's all kinds of other things that come into play when we determine whether or not we're valuable. And I love your metric. If I can set things up so that I pay for myself, that's such a interesting way to look at it in terms of selling yourself and the value that you bring is, hey, listen, you are already suffering from these problems, and if I eliminate those problems, it will pay for me, and so you guys aren't going to lose anything. I mean, I don't mean to minimize the work that you're doing, but I'm just saying it's a really cool sales pitch that I'm sure has a higher degree of success than others. Um, so I'm curious then, here's the $1 million question, Dave. In your work where humans and all this have to integrate with technology, and then the headline right now is the rise and advent of AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, large language models, generative stuff. How do you see that all fitting into first of all, your sales and marketing process? Like, is there room for that in handling customers, maybe creating feedback loops, that sort of thing? Or are you more reluctant, kind of hands off, just kind of watching from the sidelines? Where are you at with all that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Being in primarily in healthcare, you learn to be really, or you have to be really cautious about new technology
Hmm.
because of HIPAA. So that's typically the approach I take, and it's also the approach I learned from just working with technology for so long. And I'd be curious if you kind of come to the same conclusion, but it's rare that something that comes out as strong as AI ends up fulfilling the promises that are originally made that would be big in the first place.
Hmm.
And I don't know, AI could be a total game changer, but the way I've been approaching it, we see companies like Google put out Gemini, and it's annoying. It's annoying, and
Hmm.
it's on the bill all of a sudden, and like it's not terribly useful for like the day to day tasks, but they've thrown it out in this general way where any worker should have access to Gemini and it can do all these things, and you just never end up using it and you try to turn it off. So I think you have to be really targeted in your approach. Where I have found it to be really beneficial is twofold. Um, when it can be trained on custom data sets to answer basic questions,
Hmm.
and I've seen that come into play with a couple organizations in their call center support software, and internally when it can communicate with people in the method which they choose. Like when I want to send you an email, or I want to talk to you, or I want to talk to a friend, I pick up my phone, I open WhatsApp, I open Google Voice, or the Messages app, whatever. And I'm not going to a website. I go to a website when I want to, like, I don't know, what do I go to a website for nowadays? I don't go directly to a website. So when you can build it into Slack and it's this conversational and it's successful because it's trained on your data set, people can ask it questions. I find that to be pretty beneficial, just the basic stuff. But we've had that forever. Chatbots are nothing new. So why is this different? So so while there is a little bit of success, like I said in the first part, with the customer success with the customer support platforms, because you can ask it a very basic question, and it can give you a pretty up to date answer. The second place where I found it, and this is actually the top one, is it's made integrations and basic development work accessible to a technically proficient person. So I'm not going to give Peggy in HR I'm not going to recommend she uses OpenAI to write a script to process incoming JSONs and I don't know, do something with it, send a message to Slack. But
Right.
I can do that. Could I do that a year ago? No. And the difference is because I can ask OpenAI how to do it. I can say, write me a script in Google Apps Script that ingests an incoming JSON and posts the data to a Google spreadsheet. And the use cases for this are out of this world. There's a million of them, a million of them. Think about how many forms you have to fill out. A hiring manager hires a person, they fill out this form. What happens? Someone has to go in, they have to copy all the data out, they misspell a name, they have to put it in a different spreadsheet. In this case, we've automated most of it. And it's just this one function to take incoming information and put it somewhere else. So I love AI for that purpose. Highly recommend you learn it for that purpose. And it's really easy. But all of a sudden, this world opened up where you have to wait 6 months for engineering resources to do some basic thing. You can do it on your own.
The thing that you pointed at, which I love, there's a level of expertise that you must have in order to get the tool to do what it is that you want it to do. When Peggy in HR has no idea how to write script or code or, the first thing about it, when she tries to get something, she's not going to get the thing that she wants. And I find this too, being a copywriter, there's a lot of things that I write that I don't necessarily need to be writing. And so if I can just get the way that I write plugged into a machine, the machine's going to give me not 100% perfect every time, and I get that this is the worst the technology's ever going to be, and it's only going to get better. Um, but I can get it at least very, very close, and then from there to continue to refine. So it's really simplified the workflows and the processes and things like that. So I love that there's an openness to it, but also a caution because yeah, it can also create more problems than it is, and at times I don't know if you share this idea here, but a lot of times it feels like we're participating in an experiment and they're testing and trying things out, and we're the guinea pigs that are just kind of running in the wheel trying to figure things out. And hopefully, as things continue to evolve, we're going to land somewhere where the tool is useful, but also doesn't take over humanity and crush us
Yeah.
like Skynet. um,
Yeah.
Dave, we're kind of coming up to the end of our time together, and there's so much insight that you've offered, and I'm very grateful for that. I kind of want to wrap things up here, um, and just pose the question: what's on the horizon? What's in the future here that you guys are aiming at in terms of growth and implementation, new technologies? Like, what are you excited about for the future?
Yeah. One more AI thing. Sorry, because I'm thinking
Sure,
about
yeah,
these.
yeah.
Have you been in any meetings yet where they've summarized the conversations?
I actually use these tools frequently. Yes.
Yeah, I thought you might. I like that. I think it's funny. There's a
Mhm.
lot of cases where what it spits out it deserves to be on like Comedy Central or something, but like those are really useful too.
Yeah.
Um, I'm really excited about um, Chrome's premium browser.
Mm,
I think in the old days we've been issuing laptops to everyone. Like companies incur this huge expense. They got to ship it out, and honestly, I'll be honest with you. I don't see a lot of employees returning their laptops anymore. I'm not suggesting this. In fact, I suggest the opposite. But they have become a major liability. And
mm.
so and everybody has one. It was like when phones came out and you had to use two phones. Nobody's gonna do that. So I love the idea of being able to lock down the experience in Chrome because nowadays a computer is just a vessel for Chrome. It's
Mm.
like, what do you prefer, a pen or a pencil? You want a MacBook or a Windows? Doesn't matter because you're just going to open Chrome and work in that all day. So Island is another browser out there that did this originally, but Google, you kind of saw it coming a mile away. So really excited about that tech. And I love the Zapiers of the world. They're just getting better and better. If this then that. I said you could use OpenAI to write a Google Apps script to ingest something, but these things already exist out there. So you can just tell this service to take data and send it to that service. Make is another one. Those are great.
There's a ton of them. Make integrately, Zapier. There was if this then that was one of my first automation tools, and it's very basic now compared to some of the stuff that I've done with some more advanced platforms. But yeah, there's a ton of these things that are just kind of they're evolving so quickly, and it's hard to keep up. And it's innovators like you, Dave, that kind of help us, the regular folks, stay tapped into this whole thing. On that note, Dave, if somebody wanted to reach out to you to pick your brain further or perhaps work with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, Dave at theitplan.com, or check out my website. You can actually text me from that,
Cool.
which is fine to do. Go ahead. And you can find me on LinkedIn. Whatever is easiest for you. If you can find me, please reach out. I'd love to chat. Thank you.
Beautiful. We'll make sure to link to all that in the show notes. And if you wanted to get in touch with me or my team for any reason, you can visit nextgengrowth.com. Otherwise, that's it for this episode, and I will see you in the next.